Hello, BookTube. We're back with another castaway. This is Regina from Regina's Haunted Library. And
Hello.
take it away, Regina.
Hi, I'm Regina. Thanks, Sean, so much for inviting me to be part of this. I think it's a fascinating series of questions, and I really struggled coming up with the answers. But happy to be here to share. So my name is Regina Saint Claire. I have a BookTube channel called Regina's Haunted Library, where I talk about books that I'm passionate about, which are mostly horror books, but some other books as well. And I'm also a writer. I produce a horror tube anthology. I'm coming out with number 3 that's coming up in October. And I write a lot of books myself, so mostly horror. So that's kind of what I do.
Okay, yeah. And I'll have all the links down below where you can check out Regina's books as well and purchase.
Thank you.
So you've got 8 books there to take
Mm-hmm.
away to the as way to the island. And let's go through them one by one.
Okay, so I guess I had a couple questions. Is this like indefinite? My time on the island? Or I don't
For
know.
longer, no, that hasn't really sort of
Okay.
developed. Let's just think that it's for quite a long time, and you'll probably want something to reread over and over.
Okay. That's kind of how I was approaching it. I was thinking books that, I would have a long day with a lot of sunlight and a lot of time. What books would I want?
So yeah, if jump right in and explain your picks.
Okay, so I'm glad I actually wrote it down up here. Okay, so well, number one, I just Googled this. I just said, is there like a wilderness survival for dummies or something? And it turns out there was.
Oh, okay.
So I have not read this book, but I just figured, and then I thought, well, maybe I should get like a Boy Scout survival book, but I figured this might have it covered as far as what I would need to know. And yeah, I mean, I actually grew up in the country, so I'm not that. I think I could do pretty well surviving out in the middle of nowhere. I kind of, it's actually one of my fantasies. Maybe not a deserted island or desert island, but just, a little time alone is always nice. So I think it would be important to understand, though, like how to find water to drink and this kind of stuff. Food sources would be useful.
Yeah, yeah, that could be, yeah, because
But I have not read this book, so I'm not recommending it. And I really don't like For Dummies. I've always kind of found that whole series a little insulting, but I don't know. It probably would help.
yeah, I sort of suspect it might say something like, "You want some milk? Go to the local local
Oh
shop."
my God. Go to the cow down the street.
Yeah,
Yeah, I can't endorse it, but
yeah,
that was kind of my dumb pick.
that's fine. Yeah, and then just carrying on.
Okay, so number 2, I picked Frankenstein by Mary Shelley because that is really my favorite novel. I mean, I've read that novel. I probably haven't gone 2 years without rereading it.
Wow.
And I don't know when I first read it. I'm trying to like read the novel. Of course, I always watched the Frankenstein movies and I knew about that. But gee, I probably maybe in college, but I just loved it. I just it really speaks to me on so many levels, and I love. There's my dog running around. I love the language. I think that the whole, for some reason, it still feels really fresh, the story, because we're still dealing with that theme of being, godlike, our inventions. I mean, I'm thinking of like artificial intelligence now, kind of moving into that, which seems to be an inevitable step. Maybe I won't be here to see it really come to fruition, but I think it's definitely going to happen. And who knows how that will play out? And I think this is it's a morality story in a way, but it's also a very it's a forward thinking story, and I just love it. I'm just always go back to it, and it's a great horror story.
Yeah, and you mentioned that you know the films. Do you have a favorite adaptation of it?
Well, I really do like the Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, the Kenneth Branagh film that came out, and I think it was in the late '90s, maybe in the mid '90s. I think that's, it's not exactly true to the book, but it's very well done. I think it captures the spirit. Oh, I do remember when I first read it. It was when I was a senior in high school, and I never forgot that the image of, I love the Arctic scene at the start of the story, and the chase across the ice with seeing this monstrous form chasing Victor Frankenstein, or Victor Frankenstein chasing the monster, rather. It's very visual and really scary.
Yeah, like in some ways, it's as if she was writing it for the screen before the screen was even there, obviously. Which is a bit strange, but yeah, there hasn't been. It's probably the closest is the Kenneth Branagh. There was one in the '70s that might have been close to, but for some reason they missed the boat on every adaptation of it pretty well. They just don't do it.
Is that, it's one in the '70s, the one called The True Story? It was like a TV movie.
I think, Michael Sarrazin.
Yes, that's very good. I rewatched that recently, like within the last year. It is really good.
Yeah, that one I think just marginally like I like better for authenticity for the novel rather than the Kenneth Branagh one. But they're very close. They're very close in my opinion.
Very close. Both of them are good. I think when I rewatched the TV movie, I felt like it really got the relationship between Victor and the creature.
Yeah.
Well, and I think the Kenneth Branagh one was really dramatic.
Yeah.
But it was still great.
And it's better photography, obviously.
Oh yeah, sure.
The TV one, yeah.
The whole ice section and climbing the alpine mountains and all that stuff is great.
Yeah, and you kind of wonder, like, this is well over 200 years since she wrote this, and there's no concept that this would have probably lasted her lifetime, if not, till now. It's just amazing because, like, it's called horror many times. Like you say horror, but it's also considered the first modern science fiction novel as well.
Right. Yes. Mm-hmm.
So it does both duties there at times. So it's just great.
It's a great book. Yeah.
So yeah.
Okay. So number 3. Well, I was thinking of bringing for the island my favorite Shakespeare play, which is The Tempest, which is about a man who's on an island and with his daughter, of course. But I thought, why not just bring all of it? Because I really do love Shakespeare, and why not just the whole thing with the sonnets and everything? Because that you can spend a lot of time on Shakespeare's plays, acting them out, which I love, and I've directed several of his plays for school and other like community theater productions, and The Tempest is probably my favorite. I've directed it twice.
Oh.
Yes. And trying to think of, I love them all, but yeah. I think that play, just something about the mystical quality of it. I feel like Shakespeare I believe it was his last play, or one of his last plays. And it has such a maturity to it. Prospero is an amazing character. I saw it. Oh my God, what is the actor's name? Who's in Star Trek?
Because I know John Gielgud played him once.
No,
Patrick Stewart.
Patrick Stewart. Sorry, I completely forgot his name. I saw Patrick Stewart do it on Broadway.
Oh, okay.
And it was really amazing. And it was a very kind of a bare bones production. But we saw the final performance. And during his final speech, Prosper's last speech, they started taking the set apart.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and it was really cool. Like they brought the house lights up, and he's like, my charms are all overthrown, all the his last speech, and suddenly like the set was being taken apart. It was very cool. Sorry, that's my dog.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
So I don't know, that play really speaks to me, and I think if I was on an island, it would really hit home.
You just be missing all his books. That's the thing. That you won't have all his library on.
Well, that's true. Prosper's library, right?
And the interesting thing is that Shakespeare, like it's come up on several episodes of Desert Island Books as well, but Tempest is kind of neat as well because it's been adapted in so many different ways for TV, for film. Mm-hmm. The Forbidden Planet, 1950s science fiction film, is sort of Tempest is the basis for it, and they're going to.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's vaguely there, but it's part of the basis, I guess. Yeah, that's as simple as that. I don't know how much the writers actually took it, but you can see little bits in it if you watch it. Yeah.
Well, it's a great play, and I think it still can. And like a lot of Shakespeare plots, of course, he got those plots from a lot of the times from other sources, old myths and things like that, and kind of pushed them together. And it still works today. I mean, what is the there's a film called Tempest, Paul Mazursky. Did you ever see that with John Cassavetes?
I know. I've not seen it. I know it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's called Tempest, and I think it was back in the 80s. That was really good, and I think it still can be re-explored as a story basis. Like taking the plot and using it. It's great.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and then you've got all the other plays too to play with. Oh, that's a bad one.
So many. Okay, so that would keep me occupied. You can always dip into Shakespeare,
Yeah.
And also just to finish up with William Shakespeare, I feel like language-wise, it's like you can't get any better.
People seem to find it intimidating, and I don't quite understand that. It's like you don't read it like, just scanning through. You savor the lines and the sound of it, and it's that makes it totally different and so much more enjoyable that you then can see other meaning in it, and I think you can see meaning just in the sounds as well.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, and I think it's one of those things, the more you get into it, the more rewards you're going to find. It's just like so rich. Yeah, it shouldn't be intimidating though. I mean, I think that if it's done, it should be like, if you're looking at like kids, exposing them to take them to see a really good production.
Yeah.
Or a good film adaptation. I mean, I had a really good Shakespeare teacher in high school who showed us, and I always loved the tragedies. I mean, I like the comedies too, but I always love the tragedies. He showed us Peter Brook's King Lear. And then I was sold. Like, I was absolutely sold. I just loved it ever since, because that's such a work of art.
Yeah. For me,
moving on. What's that?
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, for me, it was similar. They played, but we did Macbeth. I did it for a couple of years in a row, and it was Orson Welles' Macbeth, and just blew me away.
I've seen that many times. Yeah, that's great. I mean, all of his, and he was so ahead of his time with his production in Harlem back in, I don't know, when was that, the 30s or something?
Yeah, early mid 30s.
Yeah, it's a whole other thing.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's see. Oh, The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde is my next one. I almost swapped this out for the Holy Bible. I know it seems like a weird swap, but I was like, should I trade my like really decadent read for something more religious, where I might need the Bible, but I decided to keep it secular. But well, this is another one of my favorite novels that I read every few years. And every time I read it, it's just such a delight. And it's almost like I just wish that Wilde had written more novels. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
it's great. The language is just, it's funny. It's sad. It's just, it's so witty and wonderful, and just, it's just a joy to read. And
Well,
it's one of those books that I just zip right through every
mm,
time, you know. And that's
yeah.
another one. If people want to read like a classic, that I don't know if I would consider it horror, but it definitely, like, just the notion of it scared me when I was a kid,
Mm.
because I remember probably watching a movie version of it with my mom. My mom and I always, we bonded over watching horror films, but her just telling me the plot scared me, you know, because it's great. It's a wonderful idea. And, but if someone wants to read a classic, I would really recommend reading that book. It's not long.
No, yeah.
And
And
it's
sorry, I was
great.
just going to say, to me, it's sort of like when you read it and when you see the words of Dorian, and you're saying the humor and the wit, it's like, that's Oscar Wilde. That's
I
not Dorian
know.
Gray. That's Oscar Wilde. And it's gothic. So yeah, so it's, there's that horror type of element in it, I think. So
Yes, it's very gothic, and I almost think it could. I've never seen like a really good film adaptation of Wilde's life. I've watched a couple where they, his whole relationship with Lord Alfred Douglas, because like Lord Alfred Douglas is Dorian Gray as far as like the his physicality.
hmm.
And I know there was one film where Jude Law played Lord Alfred Douglas, but I don't know, that film to me didn't work as well. I feel there's still like a definitive Wilde story that needs to be told, you
Well,
know.
I think Stephen Fry did well. I think that's the one with
Yeah,
Jude Law.
that's the
And
one. Mhm.
yeah, but yeah, the Jude Law didn't quite work for me for that. But Stephen Fry as
Yeah, he
Wilde,
was good.
yeah, that worked. I think he's the best Wilde that there's been.
Yeah,
But the whole
yeah,
film, yeah, it had
yeah.
its problems.
Like his acting and his physicality was perfect, but it was,
Yeah.
maybe it was the script or the film. I don't know. I found it was a disappointment. I also read his biography, which I think it's just called Oscar Wilde, which was really powerful
Mm.
and really sad, like what happened to him.
Yeah.
Okay, should I move on?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
can see I'm sort of in this one kind of period here. Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. It's another one of my favorites that I reread every few years. I read it, I think I reviewed it on my BookTube channel. I read it a few, maybe 2 years ago, or since I've been on BookTube. And it's not a perfect novel in a way. Uh, the whole section where she leaves and goes back and kind of like does that pathetic like walk in the wilderness and then hooks up with the other family and everything. I feel that weakens the story in a way, but it's a great it's like the gothic story that so many other books have been, based on. I mean, I read a lot of gothic literature like pulp fiction. It all kind of goes back to Jane Eyre, in my opinion. It seems to be where it all started.
Yeah. I have to acquaint myself with Charlotte Bronte and Jane Austen, that because I read them in my early 20s and I didn't like them. Like I read them all, and recently in the past few years I'm hearing people talk about them in a different way, and I think I have to go back to these, and I'm sure age will have changed my perspective and
Mhm.
how I will, or the way I will get stuff out of the novel. And I'll leave the sort of love story and stuff like that, which I don't really care for too much, aside. And I'll dig
Okay.
into like for Jane Eyre, I'll dig into the gothic bits and like that, I think. But
So you're not into the like the romantic
Not
speculative.
particularly. Yeah, it's I know I'm in a minority for
No,
this.
hey, look, I'm not a big romance. I like dark romance, but I don't really read romance either. But
Yeah.
but gothic romance I love.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I think now, like 30, 40 years later, I can appreciate it in a different way, and I just
Yeah.
have to get back to doing that.
Yeah, like I mean, I've read Wuthering Heights many times too, and that's not one of my favorite. I mean, I do love it, but I like Jane Eyre better. Uh, and then the Brontes, I read all of those, but I'm not like, I don't go back to those that much. I figured, okay, I've read them. Moving on. But they're great. Don't get me wrong. Okay, so I chose number 6, War and Peace by Leo Tolstoy, because I've never read this book.
Neither have I. I'm good.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, sorry. Go ahead.
And I figured if I'm on the island, I have a lot of time. And it's a very long book. And why not read it? I do like Russian literature. I mean, I'm not that well read in that, but I read Anna Karenina. I've read Turgenev, a lot of like short stories. Like I love the flavor of Russian literature. And yeah, so why not? Thought it would give me a lot of time. I probably should read it. It's hard to commit to a really long book. I don't know why that is. Maybe I feel like
Well, you got a life.
I have. Well, no, but I read a lot. But it's I'm reading like books like B.C. Andrews.
But yeah, I was supposed to read it a couple months ago, but I got ill again, and Greg from another bibliophile reads. He's going to. I'm not sure if it's a reread for him or it's the first time. And we're going to do it sort of together as a buddy read. So if you want to join us at the end, I think we're going to start at the end of October and go into November.
Well, maybe I will. Let me know, Sean, because I like buddy reads. It kind of gets
yeah
going.
I'll verify.
How long is it? Is it 1,000 pages?
It's a little over 1,000 in the Penguin edition. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and yeah, I'll speak to Greg, and then I'll get back to you, and then I'll tell everybody that we're doing this at that time too.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it's doable. It's just one of those things, just have to commit to it. I've read books that long.
Yeah. Well, we're going to do it over a longer period of time.
Yeah.
So, it won't be like a Steve Donahue read where, we start it tonight and finish it at 6 a.m. in the morning.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I've read Stephen King books that are at least that long. And there's no Stephen King. I really have gone with like a lot of classics on my list. But it was good because I actually really had to think about what I liked. So then, so reading War and Peace. Yeah, let's do it. And the next one, I put the Penguin Book of Romantic Poetry. I just searched for on Amazon for a book, like an anthology of romantic poetry, because that's my favorite poetry. I love Byron. I love the whole idea of like Byron and Shelley, and Mary Shelley, the whole weekend in Geneva. That I don't know if you've ever seen Ken Russell's movie Gothic.
Yeah.
Which is so it's good. It's decadent. It's really decadent, but it's great. All of his movies are really, really wild. But so I love the idea of the romantics. And I mean, I don't know if he's included in that, but I would put Poe in there, like I love Edgar Allan Poe is my favorite, one of my favorite, American authors. And yeah, I mean, I just love it. I love Shelley, Keats, all of them. If I have to, I also love, just like the decadent poets,
Yeah, well, there's a lot, and I've actually haven't seen that volume, but it's the volume that is edited or put together by Jonathan Wordsworth, which, as we were talking before the recording, he's the descendant of, I think, William Wordsworth's brother or something like that.
Okay.
Yeah, it's there's a connection there, definitely. And
That's
I like
cool.
the fact I had to check if there was John Clare in there, and there is.
Oh, okay.
That's good, because John Clare is one of my favorites.
Oh, okay. Well,
Very
maybe I'll buy that book because Penguin books are pretty reasonable.
Yeah, and it's over 1,000 pages as well, so
Yeah.
there's a lot in there.
Just
There's a
to
lot
have
in
it by the bed table and just kind of pull it out. And I mean, it's like, I remember when I was probably in my 20s, I was reading a lot of Jung and Freud. I was kind of in that world. And then I remember switching from like reading Freud and Jung to reading poetry. And I found poetry much more rewarding and in the same topics, you know?
Yeah.
So yes, so
I assume you've probably read Man and the Symbols
I
by
did. I definitely read that when I was young, and you know, I should probably revisit some of that stuff.
I would like to too, because I really like that. And I must have been in
Yeah.
my early 20s when I read that, and it really had an impact, I think. I don't know for good or bad though. I'm not too sure at this point.
I don't know. I mean, I think that all that stuff is definitely worth reading. I hope that, you know, because that was in my college years, but I hope that students are still reading that, still exposed to it.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know. Is it out of touch? I'm not sure.
Well, I think a lot of stuff as you know, like they just are saying it's, we shouldn't read this for X reasons, and it's too bad that that's happening with a lot of stuff. I'm just waiting for Shakespeare to be thrown out of the curriculum for some reason,
Yeah, I mean, you know, my education was really in like the humanities. I was a comp lit major, and well, I started as a theater major, and then I thought I would switch to literature, like could actually make more money that way or have a job. Of course, that wasn't really true, but and then my emphasis was in drama, so I studied starting with like the Greeks. You know, I loved all the Greek playwrights and all the Greek tragedies. I performed. I played, in Greek drama. You know, I did all this stuff, and it was wonderful. So I just loved the classics. I mean, they really spoke to me. And when I figured out, probably in high school, and it was because I had some really good teachers, and my high school was really good. Some really good English teachers, and I took this class called World Novels. So we read all kinds of books, and that really opened my eyes. Like we read Madame Bovary, you know, in English, not French. I didn't quite go to that kind of school, but when I discovered that these books that I always kind of assumed these are boring, were actually not boring at all, but amazing, you know, that was like the door opened, you know, and I just started reading this stuff for pleasure.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. It's and sometimes being forced to do it can help, but then other times, if you are against that, I don't think those people will never appreciate. They may never appreciate those, because they will still think, even if they're not told you have to read it, they won't read it because they'll still think it's boring. But give it a chance.
Yeah. I mean, when I directed The Tempest, and I did it I directed it at a Catholic girls' school, so it was a completely girl cast, and everyone was cast as like female characters, like but except for Caliban. I think Caliban was kind of more like neutral, you know, just like a being. But all the other characters, and Prospero we did like as a mother figure. So we had all these girls, and they just and they were all really, you know, smart kids, but they just were loving it. They were loving the story and loving the language and laughing their butts off at some of the lines, and then also getting into the political aspects of the play. And it still applies to now because it's about people. And that's what I hope that, like you were saying, that because it's like dead white men or whatever you want to talk about who wrote these, it doesn't mean that it can't be applied to any human situation.
Yeah.
You know, and that's what the humanities are all about. I would hate to see that lost.
Yeah.
Although we should have more inclusion in the canon, I definitely believe that. But going back to like Shakespeare, that's all about humanity, and it can be applied to any human. It doesn't just have to. I mean, you can be, you know, a woman, you know, and still feel for King Lear. You know what I mean? I work at a theater. I do wardrobe. I work part time at a local theater in my town. And before COVID, the last season we had, then COVID shut us down for 2 years. We did a production of an all-female King Lear. Really abridged. It was more of experimental theater. It's a nice way of saying it. I don't know if it really worked, but it's still like, you know, having Lear being played by a woman playing like a mother figure still worked, you know, is my point. So I think it can be applied to any human being.
Yeah.
And it should be.
If the right, I always think it's a trite saying, but the reason people got up 1,000 years ago, 10,000 years ago, is the same sort of reason that they get up and do things today. It's a trite saying, but there's true. So if a writer captures that, it's going to work then, and it'll work later, and it'll work now, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I would hate to see, you know, this kind of work be lost. I don't think it will be, though. I mean, it's a classic for a reason.
Yeah. Yeah. So sorry, everybody, we get a little off track here, but I think it's interesting.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm still going. So romantic poetry. Do you have any favorite? You said Claire.
Yeah, John Clare is one of my favorites, but I like Wordsworth. I like Keats, Coleridge. I really like as well. You know,
Kubla Khan.
Yeah. Little drug trips, you know, as they go along.
Yeah. And I just love the idea of the romantics, you know. It's just great. I read a book, and I don't know who wrote it, but it's in my library somewhere, of someone who wrote a kind of like a false biography of Byron.
Ah.
Like a made up biography of Byron. I mean, based on his true life, but then kind of elaborated with like Carolyn Lamb, all these different like lovers he had. It was really interesting. And then I read a book that was not as good, but it was still interesting, where Byron was a vampire. Byron as a vampire. It tracked his whole like trip to Greece and the whole thing, but as a vampire. So it was interesting.
Well, that's sort of what Polidori's Vampire is supposed to be.
Right, and I read that.
Yeah, that's basically Byron.
That is Byron, yeah. And someone sent me an anthology of two it was really well done. They put together two vampire anthologies, one of like the male vampires was volume 2, and volume 1 and volume 2 was the female vampires, and it was great. And that was included in it. And that was the first time I'd ever read that. Okay, so now I'm getting into number 8, Robinson Crusoe. The reason I chose this, I was thinking, like, I don't think I've ever read the real book. I've read an abridged version. I think in college I probably read sections in my Norton anthology. But we had a book in our household growing up. My dad was a bookworm, so that's kind of where that came from. And we had this beautiful old book with what's his name? The illustrator. N.C. Wyatt.
Oh, yeah.
Do you know those books that I'm talking about?
Scribner's, they'll have a paste down on the front, really nice, full pages. Yeah, they're nice.
They're so nice. And we had Robinson Crusoe. We had The Last of the Mohicans. It was like a set of them. And I just loved that book. I loved Robinson Crusoe. I'm sure if I were to read it now, it's it might be a totally different experience, but at that time, I just loved this adventure story. And my dad he was like a real outdoorsman, and it was really into the Last of the Mohicans. And you know, he studied a lot about like the American Indians and all this stuff. And he was a bit of an adventure outdoorsman, a bit of an adventurer himself. He was that kind of man. And I think I really bonded with him over these books. And it was like looking at the pictures. I remember just loving the illustrations and like drawing at first, like tracing them and then trying to draw them. And so I probably would bring my child that book, that version, or maybe the actual version of the book. I don't know if it was just abridged or if it was like a completely rewritten text, but
yeah,
I'm not sure.
I didn't think they were abridged, but they might have been. It's a long time since I've seen them, so. But yeah, it's great that you bring a castaway book on being a castaway on a desert island.
That's what I thought. I was trying to think of a castaway book, and I thought, oh, Lord of the Flies. I'm like, that's a little little scary. There was actually a book I was trying to think of when I stayed at this cabin once on with a friend on it was what is the name? Oh my God, Chesapeake Bay. Sorry. Took me a while. And there was a book there that I read in that weekend I was there about this man who did go to an island. It was some kind of, I'm trying to remember exactly where it was, but he lived like in like this type of thing with his wife. And he was like obsessed with living like this. And then his wife somehow got polio and they had to leave or something. It was a great story, but there was this one scene that I'll never forget because he was on a boat and one of the ropes broke and it blinded him in one eye, like the rope hit him in the eye. And then when he was on the island, so he's blind in one eye and he was trying to like live off the land, and he had like an axe. He was chopping down a tree or something, and a piece of the bark hit him in his good eye and blinded him in the second eye. And there was a scene where he like ran through the jungle like a wild man to get out to like wash his eye in the ocean. And he did actually was able to get it out so he could see. It was like a poisonous bark or something. And I never forgot that scene. And I'm dying to know who wrote this book and like where I can find it, because it was just one of those books I picked off the shelf, but I never forgot that scene in that book. And I thought about this when I was doing this, but I had no idea what the name of this book or who wrote it.
Somebody will know. And
maybe someone knows it. It felt like it was like just sort of a guy's memoir, of this life that he lived. And his family wasn't into it, but he was like obsessed with living just like out in.
Yeah, well, you got me there at the second blinding in the eye.
Oh, I know. Can you imagine? But it was that scene of he became like an animal, and that's when, but like at that moment, he said he felt like truly alive. He was living in the now.
Yeah.
The way an animal like has to survive or whatever that was. But I thought that was so powerful.
Yeah, hopefully somebody will know.
I hope so. Maybe I'll do a little more of a search for it to try to find out.
So 8 books. Eight books. Well, yeah, maybe the dummies one. I'm not too sure because you haven't seen it, so that may or may not be useful.
Yeah, I'm not recommending that. I haven't read it, but I figured it's better than nothing. It might have some useful information.
So now music. What would your album be? That
was really hard, but I decided again to go with a classic, and that is something that it's probably a long piece of music. I know it's long. Like when I was growing up, we had this, my dad was a big opera fan, and he was Italian. Well, he's from Italian. My grandparents were from Italy. And so we had opera in our house growing up, and we had this I think it's I actually have it. It's like a 4 album set of Verdi's Rigoletto. And it's a very dramatic story of a court jester whose daughter falls in love with this caddish duke who, uses her, and it's all about a curse, and it has a very tragic end. I don't want to spoil and give away what happens, but it's a very tragic ending. And the music is so beautiful. And I think it was Maria Callas who was playing Gilda, the girl's, the female lead, and on this album. And my sisters and I would act it out. So we were always, really theatrical. We would act out the death scene at the end. And because we would act it out, we put on a lot of plays when we were kids at my house. So I grew up in the country, and we had like 3 channels on the TV and not a lot of people living around us. So we did a lot of plays and we entertained ourselves, but just acting out the scenes from that opera. And I've seen it a couple times. I saw it at the Met twice, and it's great. And I thought, if I have to have any kind of music on the island, I want music that is really going to move me. And of course, I'm not really into classical music. I'm like a rock and roll lover. I love rock and roll, like classic rock. But I was thinking, what rock and roll album would I bring with me? It's impossible to choose something like that, because what am I going to bring? Pink Floyd or Fleetwood Mac? No, I'm going to bring, Rigoletto, because it's kind of just, it's brilliant. It's beautiful. And, I do love opera. I'm not I'm not that knowledgeable about opera, but I've seen many operas, and every time I would see a new one, I would buy the record, buy like the CDs at the time, and just listen to it over and over again. And I've been to the Met many times, and probably the best opera I've ever seen was San Francisco Opera, which was about 10 years ago. And I saw, we saw Barbara Seville, and it was great. So, and we also saw, I think we saw 2. We saw Barbara Seville and La Boheme. So, yeah.
That's something I've never seen an opera live, and it's something I wanted. And I've actually never seen, even as much as I like Shakespeare and reading it, I've never seen a live Shakespeare play. I've seen them on TV. I've seen the film, okay, but I've never seen one sitting in the theater.
Oh, wow.
I'm in England here, and I still haven't done that.
Oh, you live in England? Well, what? I mean, you can, now that COVID's, you got to get out there.
I was even in several years ago, about 5 or 6 years ago, I was in Stratford-on-Avon, where,
it all I don't started, yeah.
It. But it was, you couldn't get tickets for a long time. At that time, I think what was playing was Hamlet with David Tennant, the Doctor Who, but he was playing Hamlet. I think it was that. But yeah, you couldn't get tickets. It was around Christmas time. I think you could buy a ticket to get in March or April the following year. And I think, oh, that's all use now.
Wow. Yeah, well, I mean, there are a lot of great productions of it. I've seen good ones, and I've seen not so good ones.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I do have to prioritize and do that, but it's like, even at ballet, I'd love. Anyway, that we're getting way off topic there, but
no, but that's good. I mean, I've been to a few ballets, but it's not something I've watched a lot of ballet on, because I wrote a novel. I wrote a trilogy, a 3-book series about the world of ballet. So I did a lot of research. So I watched a lot of ballets, and I read about ballets, but I haven't seen too many. But yeah, let's see. My husband, he loves music, but he's from Virginia. He loves country music, like traditional country music, and he plays guitar and banjo. He plays bluegrass and this kind of thing. I've only gotten, to know that music through him. This is not like my first choice. I do really enjoy it, and I've, seen a lot of stuff with him. But opera is the one music that we really love together. So we've had, season tickets to different opera companies, and love dressing up and going to the opera. And of course, the Met just is so expensive now. When we used to go, it wasn't as expensive. But but San Francisco was probably one of the best. And we also saw a really good opera at I think it was Toronto. I don't remember the company, but we've seen some good productions.
Well, that's good, yeah. And being on an island, you could play it as loud as you want and sing along with it as loud as you want. Nobody care.
Yeah. I think opera is one of those, like ballet. It's a niche, like in classical music.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I love listening to some, and I just love the spectacle of seeing something like that. I don't know how often I would go. Well, I think I would go to opera more often. I would love to see a ballet at least once. Don't know if it would be a regular thing, but at least once I want to see it. And and that might be enough.
Yeah.
So now we got your luxury item, which I think sort of goes back to your first book in a sense, to be useful.
Well, it wasn't. I was thinking luxury with my complexion. I probably would need sunscreen, but I chose a magnifying glass because just very practical. Because I need reading glasses now anyway. I figured my eyes are just going to get worse. There is I don't know if you've ever seen this, Shawn, but there is an old Twilight Zone episode about a guy.
Burgess Meredith, he loses
in the library. Yeah. All the books, and then his glasses break.
Yeah.
So it's like, that's what would be like the worst thing. That would be like having being blinded in both eyes, like that guy I was telling you about. So I figured, I have to have, in case my reading glasses break, I have to have a magnifying glass so I can read the fine print in these classic books. And I could also start fires with them.
Yeah, that's where I think back to the first book.
Yes, because I was a Girl Scout and we learned how to do that.
So you wouldn't use flint napping or the
No, you just need sunlight and
I know, but you would use that instead of flint or the stick.
Yeah, I've never done the flint. That's never worked for me.
But yeah, no, it's just remind me. Yeah, that's a great Twilight Zone episode with Burgess Meredith. He's a bank clerk, and Tommy Bob goes off, and he's got all the time in the world to read. Crash.
Yeah, and he's kind of like a bastard, isn't he? And if I recall, he's kind of like a jerk. No,
I don't.
Is he mean to people? I don't know. It's been a long time since I've seen that.
Well, he locks himself. How he survives, he locks himself in the
library
vault. In the vault. So when the bomb goes off, he survives, and then he comes out, and it's just destruction everywhere.
Right. It's been a long time since I've seen that one.
No, it's a great one. Yeah. Well, that's the problem with when you have glasses. Actually, a magnifying glass is very useful because if you break your glass, I never thought of that. Because I'll be doing this too as well at some point. I'm going to be sort of on the opposite side of it. So, and I was thinking, maybe several extra pairs of glasses might be a good idea.
Yeah, no, because you don't want to be stuck with a lot of time. And it's very frustrating to kind of lose your eyesight. I always had perfect vision until I hit 40, and then it was like all downhill. Yeah.
And well, thank you for being with us and doing this.
Thank you for including me.
Oh, no problem. What other things do you have planned for either for your channel, or you mentioned a new volume coming out? So
yes, the new volume, the new horror tube anthology, and Steve Donahue is again writing. He wrote the foreword for it. He may be doing a story for it too. I have a lot of other. I have some new writers, some repeat people coming back because this is now volume 3, and some new voices. It's really exciting. And this one is called Lurking in the Dark, and the theme is monsters.
Mm.
And it's going to be coming out Halloween, and I'm going to be doing an announcement. I don't know when this video is going up, but next week I'm going to be doing an announcement video of all the different authors involved.
It'll be a little after that. I'll let you know.
Okay, yeah,
exactly when it'll
whenever
be
you post it, but it's coming up in July. I'm going to be making an announcement, and the book will be coming out in October.
Yeah, because your first one was Local Haunts, right? And then Served Cold, I think.
Yep.
Second one, yeah. And as I say, I'll have all the links down below.
Okay. Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. It's been a fun thing to put together.
Yeah, and not easy, as you find out. It's like,
it's not easy.
Some people think that it would be easier to pick one book rather than 8 books, and I can understand that to a certain extent. But I'm still struggling with the music as well. Like that one, I keep moving back and forth, on it. So I want to extend things as well. So people is like box sets are okay. That's like an omnibus book. It's just the one thing is you can't rebind books into a whole set. Nor
right.
use a duct tape like Jason Harrigan suggested. No.
Well, like the complete works of William Shakespeare, you could spend months and months on that alone. So
yeah. Well, thank you very much. So
thank you.
And book 2 will be back again next week for another edition of Desert Island Books. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.